Welcome to Magic.ai, the operating system for hospitality. At Magic, we know an operating system is more than just software and systems. It's about people, because hospitality is nothing without them. So supporting the hospitality community is our number one goal.
I think there needs to be more of a support system. Like, you have to love this business and you have to love every aspect of it, including sharing tribal knowledge on what is successful and also tribal knowledge of what is a failure.
Founded by lifelong experts, we're building the place where everyone in hospitality, from seasoned pros to first-timers, can gather, share, and grow together. Plus, we're crafting scalable tools and AI-supported software to boost your business. Dive into our vibrant community platform packed with meaningful conversations and robust tools and templates designed just for you. Need more? Our custom software solutions have got you covered. From recruiting and staffing to digital playbooks and dashboards, we're working on building a unique hub of resources unlike any other. Magic is your single point of origin for important conversations, accessible tools, valuable insights, and more. Join us at magic.ai. The evolution of hospitality is here.
You want to lead with, why is that food on the plate that you made? And what caused you to write the menu that you wrote? And how do you articulate that to people that you want to experience the same things that it jazzes you?
Chef Michel Nischan is a 4-time James Beard Award-winning chef with over 40 years of leadership advocating for a more healthful, sustainable food system. A lifelong Ashoka Fellow, Chef Michel co-founded the James Beard Chefs Boot Camps for Policy and Change and serves as a founding director on the board of the Jacques Pepin Foundation. In 2007, Chef Michel founded the food equity nonprofit Wholesome Wave in partnership with the late Undersecretary of Agriculture Gus Schumacher and with grant funding from his late partner Paul Newman.
Once we learned that that style of food preparation and preservation was deleterious to human health, we should have started iterating, and we didn't, because these systems were built on heavy subsidies and lots of people were making lots of money off them. So we pretended that that wasn't happening. I think the way the systems are failing us is that they became very embedded and haven't evolved to the knowledge base that we've been able to gather over the last 6 or 7 decades. I mean, I call tons of friends of mine in the good food movement who say that our food system was designed through the evil intent of the military-industrial complex, and ask them to kindly grow up, because it's a bullshit narrative. It honestly is. If we look back in history, there once was this war that was called the war to end all wars. And that only lasted like 20 years. And then there was another one, so then it was World War I and World War II. And at the end of World War II, actually in between World War I and World War II, when I think the developed world and the Western world that was really more pro-democracy and really wanted to see a peaceful planet really kind of looked at these types of wars seem to be becoming a reality. What do we need to do to continue to prevail if stuff like this happens? And, it's, in World War I, the way we were fielding food and getting it to the European theater, we're sending pallets of cabbage, pallets of pork shoulder and salt pork and pork belly, and it would get doused in seawater and rough crossings and become rancid. And it really was through those two conflicts that we discovered that the Allies prevailed both times, because they were the ones who were able to produce, package, manufacture, distribute, and field more food, fuel, and ammunition than the other side. So that was the leg up. So after World War II, when it was quite clear that that also wouldn't be the war to end all war, and now there was this nuclear threat, it really was in the broader public interest for us to produce, stockpile, and preserve as much food as possible. all this was happening at a time where 50% of Americans were still in the farming business of some sort, whether it was equipment manufacturing for farming, support services, whatever it might be, not just direct farming, but, and we were healthy. There was no obesity epidemic. I think maybe less than 10% of the American population was overweight or obese, and, when we learned that for production agriculture, all we needed to do was take potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen and put it on the ground, and miraculously things would continue to grow in the same place and flourish. That was a miracle, right? The Green Revolution was seen as a miracle. When we looked at being able to provide 4,000 calories in a 12-ounce tin, or a 7-ounce tin, gassed with nitrogen that could stay fresh for 20 years, that was a miracle. We could end world hunger. So we went all in. Food policy, the general public, the corporate world, the military world, and all of our allies said it's in all of our interests to pursue this pathway. And this is where my point comes in, that the system hasn't evolved. It's like once we started learning that highly processed carbohydrates, which is the basis point and the foundation of those K rations, highly processed food, actually fueled diabetes, heart disease, certain forms of cancer. Once we learned that style of food preparation and preservation was deleterious to human health, we should have started iterating, and we didn't, because these systems were built on heavy subsidies and lots of people were making lots of money off them. So we pretended that wasn't happening. Same thing with just putting nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium on the same ground decade after decade creates hardpan and eventually unfarmable soil. We should have iterated. So we stopped iterating because there were plenty of people in place that were making a lot of money from that. So that's where it's failed with us, is that in the classic American style of business, start something new, pursue the American dream, innovate, iterate, iterate until you get it right, so that your customers are happy, your business model is operating on all cylinders. That's where the system has failed us, is that the iteration hasn't happened yet. And I still have great hope that the iteration can, because I really do believe that there are things in the existing system of scale that need to be there when we talk about feeding billions of people. But they need to take into account that we got the agricultural part wrong. What are the parts that we keep? What are the parts that need to deploy and embed regenerative agriculture into these systems? The same thing with food processing. There's plenty in food manufacturing that we've learned that can allow us to preserve food for long periods of time without having to rely on ultra-processed food to deliver a final product that can, provide reasonable nutrition that's not going to cause somebody to have a kidney transplant or spend the last 5 years of their life on dialysis.
And real food costs money. I mean, period, right? And I think like that is, we've seen the dissolution of kind of the belief systems of what quality food means in terms of getting that into homes in America because of that issue of the cost, right? And we've really leaned into cheap, inexpensive, low quality ingredients, and that has had a tremendous effect, obviously, on the outcome of all Americans.
Chefs and restaurateurs are really sort of in this unique place to be able to make change in food policy and in sustainability. What role do you see chefs and owners and operators? What is their role in helping make this impact, this change?
Yeah, I think just evangelizing that it can be done. It's so funny because, we figure shit out, that's what we do, right? Those of us that are in it because we're really honestly in it for for genuine hospitality, we want to see the look on somebody's face when we provide them something that we made. We want to see that glimmer in their eye, that wow moment. But we also want to know that we are in no way harming them. And if anything, if we can actually make their life better for what we're feeding them, that's kind of like that's the multiple win-win-win-win for us, right? Any of us who got into this business thinking it was for the money learned very quickly that there ain't a lot of money in what we do.
If anyone's thinking of joining hospitality for the money, we should let you know now.
A few get lucky, but never at the scale that we see other performance artists, the George Clooney's, actors, actresses, musicians, et cetera. It's not the same, but interestingly, we have so much more of a profound impact on people's lives. But I think that also speaks to the cultural divide, to something that you were, referring to earlier, Matt, and that's that how like food being cheap is like a number one priority.
Right.
And again, we marketed food back in the days before we knew the deleterious impact of some of these foods. We marketed them because we were able to make it cheap by heavily subsidizing it. And I'm not talking about existing agricultural subsidies, because that's another thing the good food movement gets wrong. $12 billion a year all in for the top 5 cereal and oilseed crops is like coffee money for these guys. It's not what's making a little bag of Doritos so inexpensive, right? But it's like that, people's expectations that they value, supporting movie creation and iTunes and music. It's just like they'll sink more dough into concert tickets and stuff, the latest video games, than they will into food. And I think that's the role that we can play, Carolyn. I think, getting people to really fall in love with food again, but in how we actually tell stories in ways that are generative and positive and upbeat. It's like there are a couple in our culinary community that get angry about what they're doing, and they communicate with their diners in a way that scares them, and it ends up not being good for their business. I think we shouldn't be in the business of scaring people. We should be in the business of helping them understand that they just got their priorities a little bit skewed, and that George Clooney is awesome, but Jose Andres is better.
So
in my view.
So what is the thread for folks who are in the industry who want to start making a change or an impact? Like, how do we democratize the process of, kind of pulling that thread throughout all that they do to understand the impact that they can have locally, regionally, what have you? Obviously, this is a lot of what you guys talk about at Chef Action Network, and developing those relationships and those communities that help support that vision. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, first, Matt, it starts at home. When Eric and I started the boot camps, Eric Kessler from Arabella Advisors, I was on the board at the Beard Foundation. He was coming onto the board of the Beard Foundation. I was moving off of the board, when he came to me with the concept, and we kind of cranked it out and created it. The vision was to really help chefs understand how to kind of connect with their inner advocate, because there's one thing that those of us who are in it for the genuine hospitality are also overly generous. It's like, we'll gift certificates, donating our time, donating our food, showing up and stuff like that for like 15 to 30 different causes a year. It's kind of like, pick the thing that matters the most. Mm-hmm. For me, it was human health and diabetes, because my 5-year-old son had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I knew that if we didn't change our food philosophy at home, that we would be burying our child instead of the other way around, which is the way it's supposed to be. That immediately helped me connect in. And this miraculous thing in a way started happening, because people would call me for gift certificates and all this other stuff. And I'd say, I'm really sorry. I'm 100% focusing on how to use my platform to fix this thing that's deeply profoundly meaningful to me. So we wanted to kind of provide that for chefs so that they could focus. And, the boot camps are great, but they're small. It's like 12 to 15 chefs at a time, 2 to 3 times a year.
I was lucky enough to be invited and to do one with you. It was transformative.
It's powerful, right?
Yeah.
But you got to take 3 days away from your operation. You got to get on a plane. You got to go someplace far away. And then you come back, and the remote compressor on your refrigeration blew while you were gone.
Totally, right.
And 3 weeks later, it seems like a dream. But, what I encourage chefs to do, and we're actually starting to do this work at Wholesome Wave through an initiative we call One Kitchen, is build on that boot camp in coordination with the Beard Foundation. And it's get chefs in the communities that they call home to come together, realize that their actual superpower as a culinary community in the place they call home is they can set that trusted table where they can attract people regardless of their ideology, regardless of their belief systems and stuff like that. When we put out the invitation, people come because they know it's going to be delicious. They also know that we're going to have a non-intimidating conversation with them because we have a way of decoding complicated subject matters and drilling it down to what matters for all of us when it comes to issues around food in the place we all call home. And how do we all get on board with something that's going to use the power of food to make our community a better place in the place you call home? Because in the Boston, Cambridge, Wellesley area, you guys have, dozens and dozens of chefs. So in the place that you call home, you don't have to always show up all the time for everything. But if you guys really aggregate and collaborate in a way where you're tackling things one food issue at a time in the place you call home and getting other talented stakeholders who aren't chefs to buy into that, there are city food policy opportunities. There are state food policy opportunities. There are corporate opportunities for advocacy in these large-scale feeders that are operating in, New Balance is like right outside of Boston, right? It's like they feed several thousand meals a day in one place. It's just being able to take a crack at it, and inspire the rest of the community to come along with it, believe it or not, is going to get all of the people outside of the culinary community thinking much more differently about the food that they're putting in their mouths, that they're feeding to their employees, that they're investing in as a community, where they shop. All of that stuff is going to start to be informed by that type of a conversation, if that makes sense.
I think it would be helpful to also talk a little bit about the value that actually brings to the chefs themselves and their establishments, right? Because I think there is that kind of first prism that you look through when you're getting involved with something like Chefs Action Network, or boot camp or whatever it might be, and you're kind of like, it's incredibly cool. I really want to do it. It's one more thing. Yes, I believe in it. Yes, I'm going to be involved on some level, but to deepen the relationship with those chefs, in order to, help them kind of push the narrative to their guests and their customers and their community, actually there's a return for them as well.
Oh, yeah.
And their establishments, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My case study was, 2008. I've been doing, the farm to table thing before those 3 words were ever even put together in the same phrase.
That's right.
The late 70s, the early 80s. And throughout that journey, whenever there was a down economy, and I'm old enough to have seen a lot of down economies, like the economy tanks, and again, because people believe food should be cheap, even the 1%, it's kind of like the local organic sustainable thing was kind of like cool until you had an economic downturn, and then you're going to Olive Garden more often, that kind of a thing. You're going to go someplace where the food isn't expensive, at least for a while. And in 2008, I thought it was going to be like our quadruple whammy, because I was partners with Paul. Paul died, and the market crashed within 2 weeks of each other. So I'm like, we're toast.
Yep.
we out is what I was thinking, right? But something had happened, and I think it it's kind of like critical mass, because it really was like Larry Forgione and Gordon Hammersley were like fighting over who discovered the heirloom tomato in Massachusetts. But there were no farmers growing it. It was all hobby gardeners, because our food system was really geared towards the Jersey beefsteak, but anyway, it's like now, and now you can find heirloom tomatoes in a Piggly Wiggly because of chefs. But I think by 2008, it really started sticking, right? So we had told stories on our menu about David Hughes at Stonebrook Farm and why we only had steak as a special, because it's only 8% of the animal. But if we bought from David, we could buy a grass-fed, grass-finished red Devon animal and have the ground beef for your burger, the braising meat for your pot roast, etc. And when you were lucky enough to get steak as a special when we had it on, you could look around the dining room and know that every dish that you saw that had beef in it came from one person.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. But we did it by telling the story of the animal, telling the story of David. We didn't say, go watch Food Inc., which I think is a terrible way to try to get people to understand having a better relationship with food. Because I know really smart people who were customers of mine who that movie paralyzed. And then we took our approach, and then they would come and hug me because they're like, oh my God, there's hope. It's like, this just feels so much better. I watched Food Inc. and I was depressed for 5 weeks. And it was interesting because that market crash thing happened, and we started getting a lot of phone calls where people were like, are you guys okay? Michel, we're not going out as much, but we're coming to you guys more often. We hope you don't get sick of us, because we know that if we're supporting you, we're supporting David, we're supporting Woozy Wickfer, who gives you your pullet eggs for your bacon, egg, and cheeseburger. It's like they knew that by dining with us, they were actually supporting multiple business, their dollar touched, and they could trace it because we were just really transparent and very generative and positive about how we kind of connected their deliciousness to other individuals other than ourselves. And that was very cause-based, and it was super effective. So when you actually start to do this, not just in your own operation, but collaborate with other restaurateurs who you might perceive as competitors, and to me, they kind of aren't. It's almost like our style of restaurant. So it's like what you guys are doing, what Oranger is doing. I think of, everybody that's in that environment, that you guys are in. You're competing with the big chains and stuff like that, because you guys are providing stuff that they'll never encounter. You also provide the type of business and entrepreneurial leadership and voice in your community, because it's when you guys set the table, everyone's going to come, right? Everybody wants to be by you guys because you're doing things that are differently. It's dynamic, it's engaging,
and it deepens the relationships with the guests, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately.
And then people start to understand this is why, supporting your restaurants more is like us deciding to go to the farmer's market more often and go to Costco less. Not that Costco's horrible. They're not bad. There's a role that they play, but they're an awful lot of people, again, because they're locked into that. If I can pay the lowest price possible for a whole beef tenderloin, that's where I'm going to shop. That's not always the best decision to make if you really want to have a healthy community. And you're the guys who can create that narrative and tell those stories and make those connections in a way that people actually get it and understand it, because they're not being yelled at. They're being welcomed to the conversation, and also given permission to understand the power that they have as a consumer, who could actually accelerate this awesomeness in a way where it can be made available to everybody else, because everything becomes more affordable as it scales.
So I would love actually to speak about small scale farmers. So 1/3 of the world's food comes from small scale farmers.
Mhm.
But so many of these farmers have to have off-farm jobs to support their farming.
Mhm.
And so, like you just said, things will become less expensive as they scale. But how can we make sure that we help farmers make a living wage?
Yeah, I think, again, and this is a role that chefs can play, because if this becomes demanded enough, and I hate to use this term, I just don't like it. If it becomes sexy enough, if it really, and this is the role that chefs really, I charge them to get their shit together and really start coordinating on the digital media campaign part of this. You know, it, there, the technology that Amazon used to aggregate multiple, identifying places where warehouse inventory sat, so everything didn't have to come to a central warehouse and then be redistributed out and stuff like that. The role the technology can play, and right now, most of the online internet services that connect people to local farming are like underfunded startups where some couple of ex-MIT kids or Stanford kids got together to build a platform and stuff like that. It's not connected to a broader global market demand
Totally.
and a consumer base that's going to refuse to continue shopping at Amazon if Bezos doesn't get off of his ass and figure out his philanthropic play should be more, how do we kind of do what Salesforce did with their CRM platforms for nonprofits. They'll open up and make their teams and their software available to nonprofit organizations that are doing groundbreaking work to make it easier for them to scale their work. Amazon should be doing that with local food distribution. They can figure it out. There are groups that can figure it out. And I think it's less about I think the consumer demand is getting there, but it needs to be accelerated so that more and more people want it, and the demand needs to be proven. There's a technology opportunity there, but I really believe that our culinary community, and this is where it's sometimes at odds with the individual operation, Matt, but it's like, while we're doing the things that we do because we realize how hard it is to work beyond the four walls of our kitchen, it takes us away from their operation, maybe puts it at risk, that we need to continue to do that. Because if we don't see this broader explosion of the type of consumer demand where TikTokers will stop going for the convenience click and refuse to do the convenience click unless it includes more stuff like smallholder farming operations that are getting equitable access to these supply chains, we're not going to see it scale. So there's some missing pieces. And it often includes inviting to the table businesses that a lot of people would usually want to villainize,
Because they have the resources to be able to help.
Well, yeah. And frankly, if you really aggregate out and galvanize the consumer demand, they will follow. I believe in the Walmart model. I believe in it. I believe in the Amazon model. I believe in the model. I don't believe where all the money is going in the model. There's plenty of room to include the type of approaches that we're discussing right now. There is. It would make the world a better place. Imagine if global warming actually happened because technology platforms made regenerative agriculture, smallholder farming goods more broadly available, more affordably to the general public of the globe at large. And we saw climate change reversing without having to mandate government regulations. Wouldn't that be in everybody's best interest on the right and the left side of the aisle, right? Come on, guys, get your shit together. This stuff is delicious, and it also provides more income for people right now that aren't able to engage in our global economies as actively as other consumers can. There's strength in this stuff, we're not talking about a mandated redistribution of wealth. We're just talking about fucking playing fair, man. That's all.
Yeah.
Pardon my language.
I love it. It's raw. It's real. Listen, you've led some incredible teams at Wholesome Wave, which I want to get into talking about what you're doing there. Obviously, also Chef Action Network. What advice do you have for chefs, restaurateurs, owners, operators, managers who want to build team culture that's driven by purpose and that's built to last?
Yeah, I think, within the four walls of an operation, that I think it's incumbent on anybody who's leading in those environments to make sure that everybody within the operation has an opportunity to experience all parts of the operation. We had, our bussers and runners and servers had to pull a week at the dish station and vice versa. And yes, everybody had to experience what it was like. And then we would intentionally say to servers and food runners, don't pre-scrape the plates and just dump them on the dish deck haphazard, so that people could experience what happens when everybody within the operation is not operating in a way that has an intentional cognizance of the experience of the other people that are part of the operation that you in the end rely on. Because we all know, we've heard the old adage that, it's like, if the dish station goes down, the restaurant goes down. But that whole notion of that. So that was one of the things we made sure that everybody experienced all the operations, so that you could actually embed empathy in an environment where you often don't have time to be empathetic to anything. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're in the weeds.
Yeah.
So you're so deep in the weeds, no matter which of those positions that you're working, they all have their horrible, horrible weeds. I forgot to stoke the wood grill, and now I have an order for like 78 things.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see your colleagues as adversaries, right, for resources or time. But the truth is that working together in a kitchen, on a team, whatever team you're on,
you're
only makes everybody better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that was the one thing that we did. And one of the things that I really learned, and it was at the Boca Raton Marriott back in like 1987, I had like a Haitian dishwashing crew. And first, I learned a little bit of patois. Ça assez, maboulé, piti piti,
Succulente.
No, succulente is like, that's a whole nother thing. That's like making up your own language by mashing stuff together. But it was, what do you guys, they just seemed so lethargic, and they wouldn't eat staff meal in the cafeteria and stuff. And there was one guy named Hercules. And I'm like, Hercules, what's the deal? He's like, chef, it's just, we want diwi et kalaloo, we want, there's nothing in there for us, So we went to Miami markets, and I'm like, well, show me what you're talking about. We would buy it. And then his girlfriend, whose name was Mama, taught us how to bake boniato in milk. Mm-hmm. How to make diwi et kalaloo, which is basically rice and kalaloo, just how to bring these really wonderful kind of Creole Caribbean ingredients in. And then we would feature them, in staff meal in the cafeteria. And we ended up devoting, a third of the line to it, because frankly, a third of the employees in the hotel were Haitian. And it solved. So we didn't do it to solve problems. I was just like, these guys were going hungry. They weren't happy, and it's like, how do we fix that? And it ended up fixing like a myriad of other things within the entire hotel operation, because we had housekeepers
Yeah.
Who are Haitian and stuff. And it's just like, it to them, it was like, I don't know what the hell just happened, but now I feel like this place actually cares about me and who I am. I feel like I've been seen. I feel like I've been heard. And I certainly now like the food, so I'm going to be happier when I go back to work today. It's just little things like that I've stumbled across over 40 years of happy accidents. I like to share now so people don't have to wait 4 years to figure it out on their own.
And so much about that is about sharing the knowledge, like almost that belief that knowledge should be free in some regard, right? And that's honestly one of the things we're really trying to do at Magic is create an environment where you can connect with peers, you can share these ideas, you can, benefit from other people's successes and challenges.
Well, and you can grow them too. And you can grow them too, Matt. I mean, when I did Heartbeat, like at the First W Hotel, I just remember we had a New Year's Eve where we brought the menu down. We had this tri-fold menu thing. So the right and the left menu panels always had our kind of like prefix and, beverage stuff on the other side. But for New Year's, it was a limited menu. So we're like, we have these two side panels. So we're like, I had my administrative assistant. I'm like, go around and see how many languages you can get Happy New Year in. And it was 81 languages.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy because we're in New York City.
Yeah.
But, one of the things that we did in that environment is what we did for the Haitian dishwashers, in Miami, which was like 10 years prior to this. By the time we got to Heartbeat, it's kind of like, okay, we have Bangladeshi, we have Bhutanese, we have all these different folks. When we found somebody who came from a different culture and said, you like to cook? I love to cook. Okay, well, what we want to do is have you come in and you tell us the ingredients. Yeah, we have the folks who work on staff meal for the hotel are going to work with you. We'll get the ingredients in a week in advance, and you're going to work with them on the recipe, and then we're going to serve it in the cafeteria. We're going to put your name on it, right?
That's so cool.
We ended up having our staff meal was so multicultural, and it was a way that everybody working within the environment could get to know their coworkers through the food of their heritage, which is just so much more warm, so more welcoming, and so more barrier breaking.
And authentic,
Yeah, it's very authentic, and it's just like, our employees were able to take a trip around the world without ever having to leave the cafeteria. It's kind of like, stuff like that. So you can grow on it too.
Speaking of authenticity, you have been someone in my eyes that's really mastered the art of storytelling to inspire change. For chefs trying to build their brand and connect with their audience, what do you see as some of the keys to, crafting stories that resonate and keeping people coming back?
I guess it comes natural in a way. My dad was a farmer turned tool salesman who was like salesman of the month, year, quarter. But I think that if you're whether you go to a boot camp or not, whether you're working beyond the four walls of your kitchen or not, there are a couple of questions you have to answer. It's like, and the first one is like, why am I doing this? And remove from that part of the conversation because I have to put bread on my own table at home and I have a family to raise and feed. We all have to do that.
Yeah.
But it's like, why am I in this? And let's remove the Beard Awards. Let's remove recognition. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Is it the particular style of your cuisine that you really want more people to try? And then it's like, well, why do you want them to try it? Why do you love it? What about it makes you tick?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you articulate that in a way so that somebody who's not a chef can actually understand it? And what are the things about it that make you happy? What are the things about it that speak to the belief system that caused you to take out the loan or borrow the family money or do whatever you did to get into this mess in the first place, and you just really want to start there. Your story is the most important story because it's kind of like, when somebody does eat your food and say, holy shit, this was like super special. I got to write about this gal. I got to write about this guy. It's kind of like the first thing you want to know is, why did you do this? What makes you tick? And you don't want to go off on a tangent. Well, it's like, it's the one thing where I didn't need a college degree. Well, it is. I barely graduated high school, man. I have no academic education whatsoever other than that, right? But it's like, it's got to start from why you're in it in the first place, and why that's what's showing up on the plate. And then all those other questions, people will say, well, it's so good. Where did you go to culinary school? Well, I couldn't afford to do that. And then that's just another important part of the story, but it's not what you lead with, right? You want to lead with, why is that food on the plate that you made? And what caused you to write the menu that you wrote? And how do you articulate that to people that you want to experience the same things that jazzes you, that jazz you, realizing that you're telling the story to civilians, for lack of a better term, right? I think that's start with your story, why it shows up in the food, and articulate in a way that it's easy to understand.
Yep.
And you can test that stuff. You can test it with trusted customers of yours. You can test it with family members who you might have become a little bit of estranged with, or whatever. Don't always go for the safe space. Anyway, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does.
It does. We've interviewed, as Matt said, several dozens of people, and we often ask them about their marketing, and they say, me, my authenticity, my food, that's the best marketing. And I feel like it's true. It's real. And I think people are looking to connect with real people and real stories and not brands. So I get that. So last question, tell us about what you're up to with Wholesome Wave and Wholesome Crave.
Yeah. So, well, it's so funny. Wholesome Crave came about when it actually became legal. It's so funny. When Newman funded us to do Wholesome Wave, Gus and I started in 2007. What a lot of people don't realize is that when we started saying, we're going to start by doubling food stamps for fruits and vegetables at farmers markets and eventually grocery retailers, because we thought that could lead to pulling a lever on policy. It was illegal, which is why Newman funded it, because it was illegal. He's just like, that's a great idea. Gus, why don't you just march to USDA and say, let's do this? He said, well, Mr. Newman, it's illegal. And he's like, wow, awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So that, and eventually it became legal in the Bush administration, a federally funded pilot in the 2014 Farm Bill during Obama, made permanent during the first Trump administration in 2018. So just, sometimes, a lot of nonprofits set themselves up saying, oh, we want to solve a problem, but what we're doing is illegal. Let's not go there. That's too risky. Just like maybe think differently, right? But, similarly, the Newman's own model of philanthropy was not legal either. So, way back, like 2000, 6-ish, they got a treasury waiver to try a model where Paul sold his intellectual property. They created the foundation because they ran for 10 years just writing checks until the bank account was at zero, everything above the EBITDA line, and then he would write it off as taxes. And the IRS hated it and audited him every year. So what they did was he sold his IP to a 501c3, and then they licensed it Air Jordan style to the C Corp for a really large gross revenue royalty that left almost nothing above the EBITDA line so that it maximized the give back. When that became legal in 2018 in the Tax Reform Act, I created Wholesome Crave so that I didn't have to spend 80% of my time writing grants. It's a horrible use of your time and talent to continually ask people for money. So it's a plant-based soup company. We're not in grocery stores. We've focused on scaled food service because when I was the chef at Heartbeat in the W, I was also the area managing director and executive chef of the first 6 W hotels, doing $150 million a year in food and beverage revenue. So it's like,
small job, just a little thing.
yeah, well, you have to, you rely on made products. You have to find value-added products that fit your values, and there weren't any, so I'm like, okay, how do I do something that's plant-based, mostly organic, clean label, 100% fruits and vegetables, no fake stuff, no preservatives, so I can feel good about what I'm selling, culturally appropriate, based on my story of how I ran my businesses. How do I manufacture food in a way that brings those values? So that's what we've done, and we're selling to college. We're in UMass Amherst,
Cool.
a number of colleges and universities, Google, Amazon, etc. And then Wholesome Wave, the nonprofit, owns the IP, and then 3 to 5% of gross revenues, depending on our sales, then go tax-free to support the work of Wholesome Wave. So that I'm excited about. That company is growing.
Great.
We're hoping to hit break even this year.
Awesome.
And
Congratulations.
that's awesome. Yeah, thanks. And then at Wholesome Wave, we're doing the one kitchen initiative. We're starting with collaboratives in Texas, Georgia, and then the other 2 be announced. But we're piloting bringing communities of chefs together, like I had described before, to look at food issue areas in the place they call home. And right now we're starting with food and nutrition insecurity, because these are areas that have a long-standing, established, documented track record of success for policy advocacy. So Matt, you knew, like, when you went to the boot camp, it's like, okay, I get it, audience, ally, argument, etc. But it's kind of like, but wait, what's the difference between an audience and an ally? And you just, when you're getting your arms around it, you have to go back home. But this way, people can really understand all the components of successful advocacy and do it at home and keep engaged with
the
it.
Product, right?
Yeah, and watch it grow and build their advocacy muscles, so that if their real passion is indigenous food sovereignty, once they build their advocacy muscle, now they'll be much better at that, right? Now they can go out and identify an audience to convince, and the right allies, and lead in building an argument that can actually move the change needle. So I'll keep you posted on that. But we just launched in Texas. We hope to launch in Georgia before the end of the year. We know that from doing the boot camps, there are close to 500 chefs representing 30 states, and another 1,000 plus that have been on the waiting list. That it's hard to get in when it's 12 to 15 a time. So this way we can be in service to those who can't make the boot camp. We can make really good use of the chefs who have been to the boot camp, bring them all together so that they're learning together. Include college and university and scaled food service chefs, because they're not part of the Independent Restaurant Association, but they have a profound impact on the supply chain. So that's what we're up to. Never a dull moment.
Who is one person that you have hired or worked alongside who has transformed your business?
John Mooney. I call him Dr. John, and he now has Bidwell Restaurant in Washington, D.C., and I forget the name of his kind of Pacific Islander fast casual. But he was remarkable. He was my chef de cuisine at Heartbeat. When Taj Hotels, Ratan Tata became a regular customer, and then they asked me to do something similar for them in India, John was the guy that lived in India for me, so that we could do Heartbeat in India and do it really, really, really well. And his youthful enthusiasm and fearlessness is just something that I wouldn't have been able to found Wholesome Wave. I wouldn't have been able, was doing a lot of work in scaled supply chain stuff, trying to figure out ways to scale the goodness of everything that we're talking about. it was only possible because I had somebody that I could completely trust, helping move forward the things that were existing, to which everybody was pointing to for any notion of credibility and what I was trying to get done, right? So he's the guy.
Youthful enthusiasm and fearlessness what a cocktail.
Amen. And he's big. He's like 6'2" and like 285-pound muscle bound Chicago guy. It's good. It's like it's unexpected in the package.
I love it.
What's been the most successful marketing decision you've made for your business?
Honestly, I don't know, because I don't feel like I've ever been good at it. I've been lucky enough for things and people to find me. And so it's weird, but I think what I'm going to say is that I believe in the universe, and I believe I've lived my life in a way that acknowledges that the thing that allows us to have this conversation means that we're not some organically occurring compound that evolved to be able to think and speak and feel. I really do believe there's spirituality. I don't ascribe to any particular religion because I think human beings fuck all of them up by embedding their own rules and interpretations around just pure spiritual stuff. But I do believe that the way we conduct ourselves now has everything to do with what might happen afterwards. And I'm not even curious do I come back as an ant or do I come back as an elephant, or I don't care.
Maybe come back as Popeye's chicken.
Yeah, maybe, perhaps. But, so I think as a result of that, anything that has led to how the world perceives me has been the universe connecting people with what I'm doing, and then other people telling my story. It's not who I hired or coming up with a strategy. I just don't, it's not in my DNA to think that way, I guess.
And the incredible relationships.
I guess I've been, and being lucky, just lucky.
And the incredible relationships that you've built. I mean, for those listening, to work with Chef Michel in the kitchen is to get an education while at the same time, kind of watching somebody who knows food just so intrinsically, right? And that's a really powerful combination, I think, for a lot of the people who look for a higher purpose in food. I would say that's probably the one that rings the loudest bell for me.
Yeah, you're too kind. Thank you. Though.
The last one is technically on software, but it can be anything. What is the one tool that you use every day?
Here we are. Zoom, zoom.
Yeah, for
just
better or
like
worse, right?
Well, it's interesting because it really helped me. During the pandemic, at first I hated it, but then I'm like, what an effing miracle. But I started having little cheat sheets. It's like, wow, this is a meeting that I would have had to fly to. I would have made myself fly to, that could actually be done like this. And then there were other meetings that were done like this, where I'm like, this would have been great to be in person. And I came up with a little mini, mental matrix, because with everything I do, I can travel 40 weeks a year easily and be away from my family, and I, at my age, the younger I get, the harder travel gets, it's that kind of shit. So it's really kind of helped me aggregate in an effort to make better and higher use of my time, and just put less stress on my ever aging body and mind.
Yeah.